a lot of the business podcasts. Well, most of the marketing podcasts. There's a couple, but most of them are more little side project I'm working on, and sports related and coaching in general, which I think applies to everything we do. And then one personal development podcast that just keeps bringing me great new content, great new books every couple of weeks.
What's that?
The 1% Better podcast.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, Joe Ferraro. He's so funny. He's a former high school baseball coach. So he actually also helps with another baseball podcast that I listen to, and he's interviewed probably 36 of my speaker friends. Right, and in between that, he finds other interesting people, and so like I'm listening to a book he just recommended recently. Called Stories That Stick, that just came out from Kindra Hall. But he's been doing it for a few years. He's a teacher in New York, I believe. And I'm actually convincing him that he needs to do a curriculum based for teachers learning how to use podcasts for their students.
Interesting. So how is that different from other curricula?
Well, so one, there's nobody who's a successful podcaster with two successful podcasts, who's also a teacher, teaching you, and he's an English teacher, right?
Right.
Well, I'm also trying to get down to the academy, hopefully this year. That's the big goal. On how to use podcasting as a project-based learning for students. In other words, right now, my 14-year-old's been running a podcast for a little over 6 months, and it's been transformative for him. And my 10-year-old wants to start a podcast. Awesome. Because of it. And the funny thing is, I had this conversation multiple times. I said, when I first started podcasting in 2005. We're all among friends. It was the biggest pain in the ass. It was so hard to do. There was so much work. I mean, remember we started blogging before there was WordPress, right? I was hand coding HTML pages to put out our content. Right. So I've always been ahead of this. And today it's just so easy. It's so easy to do that. Especially for most small business owners who really want to establish relationships, there's just no excuse not to do it. So like, I've been helping the guys who run the gym my son trains at. I got them started with their podcast. Then of course their summer season came along and he slowed down. So he's got to start it up again. But it's invaluable.
So what are the challenges now that it's the technical bits are pretty solved for you and it's super easy to do? What are the challenges of podcasting today?
So number one is just the time commitment. I mean, just like everything else, you've got to be consistent with doing it. This is the first week my son won't get a podcast out on time in 34 weeks. Wow.
And he's 14. Good job.
And he's 14.
My 14-year-old woke up at 10 this morning because he was supposed to be at school. So you're doing well.
Yeah, no. And, he's a disciplined athlete, and, he's interviewing professionals, athletes and people in the space to learn more. And so obviously he's motivated behind doing it, but between school and baseball and working out, and it's just not a lot of time, right? And so to try to coordinate other guests, which is the big problem, if you're not doing a solo podcast, and on such a minimal schedule, because it's like he's got a little window here and got a little window there, that's kind of hard for him.
Right.
Most of my friends who I've been helping with their podcast as well, audio quality and editing are two different issues. I know for someone like Chuck, that's a cakewalk.
Is
actually,
that isn't Cakewalk a piece of software?
Just as a side note, if you go listen to my son's podcast, you'll hear Chuck.
Awesome.
Oh, was that the Play Ball Boy thing I did?
The Play Ball Kid. That's now turned into his podcast.
That's cool.
So
All
you'll go ahead and you'll open it up and you'll hear your voice right away.
A borderline thrill.
So what's interesting is there's been so like WordPress, and I was just trying to dig up the link because I saw this new platform again yesterday, but 2 new platforms just got released in the last 2 weeks that'll make the editing side of this way, 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 way easier. One of them, I'm going to pull that up right now, is called Descript, right, as in descript.com.
Okay.
And there's another one, and now I haven't been able to find the link again, but I will dig it up. But it essentially gets rid of thinking about podcasting in terms of channels for all of you audio geeks out there. But instead, it basically takes all the guests and highlights their speech in different colors. So it's not a track; it's their voice. So they're trying to make the editing part of it way easier by doing it that way.
So you can make it easier to find where the guest is talking?
Correct. And to edit things out and stuff like that. The Descript, which is interesting, it'll allow you to actually change words. Like, let's say you stumble across a word while you're talking. Mm-hmm. You can retype the script and it'll use AI to duplicate your voice and correct it.
What?
Come on. Is that the same technology that allows people to
deep fake?
To do deep fakes, yeah.
It's similar, yeah. So I have it downloaded. I haven't played with it yet because I want to figure out the right use case to play with it. But I think it's a very interesting direction. And there is some protection, so you can't use other people's voices. In other words, when it trains the software, you can only do it on your voice. So you can't do it on your guests.
Okay.
But it's an interesting, again, right now there's a lot of development around it in order to make, podcasting easier for most people. And that one also allows everybody to kind of call into the app and then it records it that way. This other one that I can't find. Because that seems to be the other problem. Because I know like some people use Anchor, which is where Sammy's podcast is hosted. And there's no excuse not for not starting a podcast because it doesn't cost you anything to have it hosted, distributed, and you don't have to worry about anything.
Is that ANCHOR or ANKER?
ANCHOR.FM.
Okay.
Only warning I will tell you is don't record in their app because it sucks.
Okay.
So as long as you upload your own files, your own audio, you're fine. Just don't use the app for recording.
Brian, I've heard some pluses and minuses about Anchor. One being, it's free because you'll have to read Anchor's ads, which isn't the worst.
Nope. It's a choice. Yeah. So at post-roll, they'll do something every few episodes on. You can also have a podcast like this on Anchor for free.
Gotcha. Okay.
If you want to monetize it, then you've got to read their ads. But yeah, Sammy hasn't done anything, and like I said, at the end of it, post-roll, they do that little 15-second thing, and not a big deal for having it for free.
Okay.
So why does? Sorry, Johnny, I was.
That's okay. And so, any concerns about does the content become theirs? Is it hard to get it off of there
Nope.
if you want to move?
No, well, so what I tell everybody is, you keep all the audio files because I wouldn't have to worry about pulling them off.
Right. I got you.
Right. But essentially, you should own them anyway. You should have them, in your own Dropbox backed up.
Right. All right.
Which of course we do, in case he ever wants to change. But because right now, for him, it's a non-commercial purpose, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
but it's phenomenal for getting there. And he's on Spotify and iHeartRadio and Stitcher and just everywhere. I mean, you name it, he's there.
And those are just check boxes on Anchor.
Well, no. So the iHeartRadio and Spotify. No, Spotify was part of it. I think was part of Anchor. iHeartRadio was separate.
Okay.
He had to submit that and get approved, which amazingly he was, because that one I heard is pretty tough, actually.
Do you have any strong feelings about Libsyn, Podbean, any of those? Blueberry?
I've used Podbean before. I think they're all more or less the same. I mean, hosting is hosting is hosting.
Okay.
Right. I mean, think about it. Whether you put it on AWS service, it's who's giving you, the easiest interface to do your stuff.
Right.
Who has a little bit better support, and who keeps updating with the newest features. Like, Apple iTunes released new podcast categories. How fast did they make those upgrades?
Yeah.
Right.
It's not more about discovery there?
Discovery is just like everything else. It's all about the marketing. None of them are doing it for you.
Okay.
So a big part of this. So the big parts of discovery are all related to getting your reviews. So I use also at post-production, I use Auphonic to run the audio through. And Auphonic will, level the voices. It'll clean up a little bit of background noise and stuff like that. So it's just kind of good for the non-technical person. But one of the things it allows me to do is also add in all the great meta information that it seems Apple is definitely using for their discovery, and I'm sure Google is. I just, for his podcast, and a lot of it comes through Instagram and Twitter shares. I think the number, and I can give you the exact number. Actually, hold on, but I think it's something like 70 to 80% of his listeners are on Apple. Hold on, I'm looking at it right now. Let's see. It is. Now it's 65% on Apple, 25% on other, 4% on Anchor, 3% on Spotify. Like, there just is, like, Android listeners is 16% of his audience.
Okay.
Right? iPhone is 62%, Mac is 5%. Other is 14. So you get a sense of, like, Android listeners are, and this is a very general sports, yeah, it's a little bit of development, it's a little niche, but it's like, it really is very Mac heavy.
All right.
Talk a little bit more about, you mentioned the metadata that Apple is looking for, and probably Google as well. What kinds of things are going into that metadata?
So you can add tags to all the files. Your title, subtitle, obviously names of guests are big. The better the guest, the more listened to he gets. I mean, it's just that, right? That's a big part of it. You can add a description / summary into it. And, you could add the image into it. So all of those things kind of just help it out in the discovery process. And then we also use a nice little tool called headliner.app that'll go ahead and create little promo videos out of little bits of his podcast. So you can take, it's a whole animated thing with, the sound waves going, and you can put the picture there, and they can also transcribe it so you can see the words going, karaoke style. Yeah. And you get like 12 of those videos a month for free.
Interesting.
Brian, headliner dot what?
App.
I know that Aphonic will also do transcription. Is that useful as well, or do you just lean on Headliner for that?
No, Aphonic doesn't do transcription. What we use for transcription is Otter.ai.
Yeah.
And I'm Otter basically, like, Otter feeds Zoom and a bunch of others. In Headliner, it'll just take whatever clip you do and it'll just do the transcription for you, for free as well. It's important to know, like, also where you're promoting it to, because obviously Instagram has a certain length and Twitter has a different length and YouTube has a different length. So all of these things are important to kind of note when you're doing your Headliner video.
Okay. So beyond the tools and tech, how do you and your son and other people who are successful podcasters approach? Is it setting up like an interview, or is it let's just hang out for a while, or do you have a purpose or a script that you hold loosely, or do you make sure that you go to certain places with the guest, or what?
So Joe Ferraro, who I would have to say overall is probably my most listened to podcast, because I listen to him both on KW Baseball and there. And even all my friends will tell you the amount of research he goes into in order to drive that narrative. Because that's what it is, right? A good podcast is just a good storytelling exercise.
Okay.
And so, the average podcaster asks, they may have a few, questions set up here and there, and they hope you kind of go through it. The best ones kind of know even ahead of time, because they've researched you so well, where that narrative is going. Now, I've got another friend, Jerry, who what he does is every 3 weeks, he just does a solo podcast, right? So and Joe does every other week. So 1 week you get a guest, 1 week you get him, right, for a few minutes. Again, the biggest challenge in doing a weekly podcast, and I think that really is the sweet spot, is coordinating and scheduling with guests. I mean, that's just the hard part.
What's hard about that? Is the scheduling or finding the right people?
Both.
Or
all of the above,
or drawing them out during the presentation?
Well, like right now. So, my son, we've hit a lot of the big celebrities, so to speak, in the baseball development world right now. Mm-hmm. Like my friend who's the top hitting coach, it was the only episode ever gone bad for him, by the way. He recorded it. We tested audio beforehand, did all the right things. They recorded it, and the audio just came out like crap. And he was here. And just in the last 3 weeks, just trying to get the two of them back on the phone so they can re-record it. It's been a nightmare for both of them. They both can't find the time to be free at the same time.
So does re-recording work? It seems like you wouldn't be able to bring the same energy or interest.
With the two of them, it'll probably work because there's enough history between them.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's not easy to do with a lot of guests, but like right now, he also wants to interview a whole bunch of professional players. So now, the ones who are not playing the playoffs are getting off, right? So a bunch of them are back in town here in Austin. So he'll be able to interview a bunch he knows here, and then once the playoffs are done, he'll get access to a whole bunch more.
Okay.
Brian, I heard you mention that every week is kind of a sweet spot for frequency. Have you found a sweet spot for length? I've heard 10-minute podcasts. I've heard 90-minute podcasts. Is there a length that seems to be?
So I think it really depends on the topic and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Sammy's podcasts are around 15 to 20 minutes because, how much longer do you expect a 14-year-old attention span to be, for one, right? Because that's he's trying to target an audience of parents with younger kids who want to learn this stuff about sports, but are not going to sit through the hour and 15-minute long podcast that other people do to find that one nugget that's really important. So he tries to really compress it into 15-minute interviews. Joe does some that are 7 minutes, 10 minutes long, and then others that are an hour plus interview. The rules aren't as fixed. I think you really want to look at what you're trying to achieve. If I've been talking to a chiropractor that I've been mentoring, and his big thing now is just Instagram and YouTube. And his are about 10 minutes long, and they seem to be perfect.
The rule I used to use in radio was nobody has ever accused you of talking too much while they're still laughing. So
exactly.
If you can keep the interest up, if you say something meaningful, you're not talking too much. It's when you start talking about things nobody cares about. Yeah, you're talking too much at a minute then.
Of course, yeah. That makes sense.
So I had another question that I wanted to ask. I've met you at the Wizard Academy several times, Brian, you and your brother, but you haven't been to the partner meetings in a little while, but everything that I know plus some. So I'm just trying to catch up. But all of those special tools in our magic belt, which ones of those apply? Which ones of them are most helpful in podcasting?
Again, podcasting is good storytelling. We have how many partners now?
Just under 50.
Wow, to me that sounds like an episode a week.
Yeah.
Where if someone would bring on a partner a week and shared a story about a business owner's problems and the type of things they did to solve them, and we also targeted niches in businesses that we want to go after.
Yeah.
Sounds to me like that would be a pretty successful podcast.
Yeah.
That's something that we're working on. Yep.
That's cool.
So here's what I've learned. It's not a question of working on it. It's just a question of getting it done.
Right.
And what I would do very, very simply is I would put out a calendar and say, look, every Tuesday morning, I have from this block to this block to record. We're going to take 20 minutes to kind of pump in a story. And you send an email to the partners and you say, grab a week. And when you grab the week, just give me a little bit of background about what kind of problem we solve, what kind of company, so I have a framework for asking the questions.
Okay.
And just start recording. Get 3 or 4 recorded to start off with. Create a preview trailer. They seem to be important nowadays. That's something new that Apple launched.
Right.
And yeah, just basically just run with it. I mean, it's a no-brainer today.
All right. That sounds
anybody doing video production? I took one stab at a podcast or vidcast, and I spent about 3 times as much putting B-roll video into it. I think it turned out fairly interesting, but I'm prejudiced. So does that add any value?
You can. So that's the kind of stuff. So, one of the ways that you can record this is using Zoom, obviously. And I've done it in the past as well, where you could take a little bit of the Zoom video clips to tease out the full conversation, right? To drive them to listen to the whole podcast.
I'd say it's almost like radio versus TV. So the media isn't the message, but people who are looking for an audio podcast aren't going to YouTube to find your video podcast.
Correct.
Well, true.
But you're hoping that the little video that you put up on Instagram grabs their attention, and hopefully they'll follow your podcast. And that's a big part of my son's strategy.
Okay.
And he's crushing it with some of the concepts I've been teaching him about Instagram as well.
Cool.
There are months where he'll average close to 1 million to 2 million impressions.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, on his little Instagram account with barely under 2,000 followers. But he was doing those kinds of numbers when he had 300-400 followers.
All right.
Just as an example, hold on, I'm going to tell you. These past couple of weeks have been a little bit busy for him, so he hasn't worked as hard. But so this past week, he's had 125,000 impressions. Like I said, it's been a quiet week for him.
How about that?
Yeah, at 14.
That's amazing. Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him. Well, I don't have any other questions of Brian. Do you guys have anything that? Thank you. So you've been very generous with your time and your information. I appreciate it, Brian.
Brian, I just want to toss in a funny. Joe Ferraro is a friend of mine who's a blues guitarist in Hesperia, California.
It seems to be a fairly common name.
Apparently.
Well, all right. Unless anybody has anything else to add, this has been really helpful. And again, Brian, you led the way, so I appreciate all your knowledge and sharing that with us.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and like I said, anything else I can do to help out, so don't hesitate to reach out. I think, like I said, I've been a guest on so many podcasts for so many years. There are ones who do it really well. Everything from how you arrange it, to the follow-up, to the marketing. When you start really putting it together, it just snowballs.
Well, I think this is going to be useful to Tim as well, Tim and Jake, who are certainly trying to populate the wizardofads.com site with content and pushing things out there. So not only what you're doing, Daniel, but what Tim's planning as well. I think this is useful to everybody.
Yeah, and this is creating a podcast is way easier than getting everyone's writing, editing it, getting all the right pictures, doing all of that.
Right.
Like I said, it really isn't like, I'm sure in 2 hours we can brainstorm a structure of questions that we can have the partners go through, so that by the time they become a guest, they look like an expert. The team they use looks like an expert. They sound like they know that niche of business, and that we can help other small business owners with similar problems.
Brian, would you be willing to start shooting those out? And we've got this recording to get things started. And
sure. So let's think of the story of I would start with just the name of the partner, what they kind of specialize in. Right. I don't want too much background on the partner, because I don't want it to be boring, because it has nothing to do about them. The hero is the business owner who reached out to them.
Okay.
So, I'd be asking them something along the lines of, so let's do this. Chuck or Johnny, who wants to be the victim here that I can play around with?
Not it.
Sure, do it.
Okay, so can you Chuck, give me the name of one of your very interesting clients, someone you really like, really cool.
Steve Beckley.
Okay. So Chuck, can you tell me a little bit about Steve and how he went about finding you? Why did he look for someone like you?
Steve had been a subscriber to my blog for a long time, and sometimes I need reaction from people to finish my own thinking process. It doesn't have to be somebody who knows anything. It could be just someone paying attention. I've used grandkids in the past, just grab somebody and say, let me try to articulate what it is I'm thinking. And the act of that articulation makes a big difference in my thinking. And I had invited anybody who was reading the blog to participate in a group phone call so that I could put some half-thought ideas on paper. Steve was one of those people who participated. And when it was done, he said, Chuck, I need to talk to you. I need your help. I think that was just the trigger that he actually got to listen to me talking for a bit. And he said, here's the thing, I want to retire. I need to sell my business in order to retire, but I need about another $1 million a year gross to be able to do that. I've got 3 years to do it in. Can you help? And I suppose I should point out that he is a mechanic and he works only on import automobiles. German and European. For the longest time, he added some of the expensive Japanese cars later. I went and did the standard uncovery, and I put together a plan. And the thing I loved about Steve is that he implements. I gave him I gave him about 32 pages of recommendations on the 26th maybe of February. And on the 4th of April, he got back to me with March's results.
Oh, I love those kinds of clients. Absolutely. So let me back up a little bit. Is it kind of unique that for a business that you work with, that they have to be either that high end type of business, or could some of these same principles apply basically to any mechanic out there?
Any mechanic who was willing to invest the resources to promoting himself. You can't just take an idea and do it, halfway. Cleaned that up, didn't I? And expect to get any kind of results. You got to make the firm commitment. Steve was doing postcard campaigns. And the thing that I told him was stop saying, dear import auto owner, because nobody is an import auto owner. I drive a BMW, I drive a Saab, I drive a Porsche, but I'm not an import auto owner. And so we split up the cars by make and did differing postcards to each one, and that alone added about $50,000 a month, and it sustained to his gross income. So now, the first 600,000 already done. Now we just had to figure out where to get the other 400.
So that's awesome. So this is a guy who took a little, just a quick one of your ideas and was able to implement it. Do you find that a lot of business owners struggle with getting ideas implemented?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
The problem is they are also running businesses, and most of them are running shorthanded. And so they are responsible for everything. And getting payroll done this week always takes precedence over gaining new customers next month.
So what do you recommend? So there's probably a lot of listeners, on the phone probably feel a lot like Steve. Maybe they're not at their retirement age yet, but they're starting to think, okay, well, I know I could probably do more in terms of marketing and promoting myself, but I just don't know how to get it done. I don't have the people to do that. How do you help them do that as a Wizard of Ads consultant?
At the risk of being self-serving, I can do it for them. And my highest price service, of course, is here. I'll take care of it for you. Not that I'm, outrageously expensive. I think by the hour I'm underpaid, but all I have to do is have a couple of conversations a month to make sure the information is flowing. And then I can take that information, turn it into an ongoing awareness campaign, usually, that will keep trickling more and more people into picking up the phone and saying, I need your help.
So let me just get this right. I mean, you're talking about being underpaid, but you didn't get paid $50,000 a month in what he's already grown, have you?
No.
Okay. So it's already a positive ROI for him.
Yeah. Keep in mind, I do the preparation of media messaging. You're still going to have to buy the media. So if you're only spending $500 a month in the local newspaper, I probably can't help you a lot other than to give you some advice and let you do it yourself. On the other hand, if you're spending, $20,000, $30,000 a month, oh, for goodness sakes, call me. I can get you that much more impact in order to justify my fee, so that you end up paying about the same thing, but you get customized service.
So let's wrap up with this. One of the tips you've already given these other mechanics who might be listening to this, or other business owners, is they really need to kind of personalize that postcard campaign. They just can't send it to generic car owner or whatever like that. So, with a little bit of data you have about them, make it a little smarter, make it a little bit more personalized. What are the 1, 2, 3 most common problems that you see with most of these mechanics?
The single biggest one is the fear to do anything different. People, I think, are herd animals. And it's no accident that when a herd of zebras is in close proximity, that a lion can't figure out where one starts and the other one ends. It makes it very, very difficult for the lion to single out one of them and say, that's where I'm going to send my attention. And so it's instinctive. I don't want to do anything that makes me stand out. And that's suicide in business, because if you don't stand out, toss a coin on whether somebody's going to walk by your shop today and decide, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to go inside and ask for help today. It's probably not going to happen. So the biggest mistake people make is in trying to look professional and look just like every other person in my industry does. If I had to give you 2 more, inconsistency of messaging and delivery, you can't at the same time be saying, you can trust me to help you make good decisions for yourself, while at the same time be saying, by the way, I have a sale going on my services right now. Those are incompatible messages. And you probably want to get some consistency about how often you deliver the message as well. Third big mistake. Man, I wish I had pre-thought this. Third biggest mistake, not spending enough to get the job done. One of my favorite quotes was from the former chairman of General Foods in a 1963 shareholders meeting. He said, the biggest mistake we have found is not spending enough to deliver the message. It's like buying a ticket 3/4 of the way to Europe. You spent your money and you still didn't arrive.
Thank you very much. If people wanted to find out more about, your background and about the services that you offer, where could they go?
They could go to fishingforcustomers.com and look for that smiling face.
Awesome. Guys, did you see how simple that was?
That's great.
Fantastic.
If
Thank
you're in a
you for the
similar
lesson.
industry, aren't you like, that might be me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One other technical.
And that's with neither prep on either one of our sides, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, great questions. Is there a platform you like to use for remote guests?
So most of the time I will use with Sammy. I use Skype with the Ecamm call recorder for two reasons. One, if they have Skype, obviously the sound quality is going to be great, and two, he can also dial out to a phone number real easily. And I'm finding that it's become way more stable as of late, and the quality is it's just been great, even on phones. I know plenty of friends who use Zoom as well. But yeah, definitely online. You don't want to be doing dial-in if you can avoid it.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Outstanding. I'm glad you did that, Brian. That was great.
Yeah, and like I said, that's without us having a real plan, but just by being a listener and just following through with the questions. Chuck now looks like an expert on mechanics and growing their business, and anybody who's in that industry is probably starting to wonder, like, well, maybe I, and he already weeded out all the guys who only spent $500.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, that's a model that thank you for the lesson. That's going to be a great influence for what we're going to do with all the partners.
Yeah, and like I said, it'll probably be easy to get the first 10 or 15 partners, right? The 10 most active ones. They'll find the time to do it. Just the way it is. I could probably give you the list right away. And as you have the first ones, it will not be hard to get other partners once they start seeing how easy the format is. Because like I said, that wasn't very long. That's a 10-minute podcast at most. And it's just that quick, informative tip. You can ask for an additional tip. Like we can come up with a couple other questions as well, but just short and sweet and tells a good story and very relatable. And we're trying to make ourselves relatable as well. That's it.
Right.
And my only suggestion is when you're done, stop talking.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Cool. Daniel, anything else you need to know?
I'm done.
Mic drop.
Yeah, exactly. Chuck, any other questions you had lingering?
No, Brian, thank you.
Yeah,
You are very welcome. If I can pop on tomorrow, I'll try as well.
Okay.
I've been this is my break from sitting and writing narratives for a client, so I kind of felt better to do this than my face in a screen, typing away. But yeah.
Hugely helpful, and I think Ryan Patrick going to join us tomorrow. Maybe Tim. So we'll have some other knowledgeable podcast folks on the line. So
how many little video boxes can you squeeze onto the screen?
I don't know. How much will Zoom take?
It's quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think if you paid for it, then it's up to 50. But you can get up to 400. Obviously, I don't think you could
with the
see all
webinar
the little boxes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and we use Zoom for our client uncovery calls as well, and it records everything, and it gives us the transcription. Do you know that you could set it to give a transcription as well?
Oh, through Zoom you can?
Yep.
Cool.
If you've got a pro account,
Yeah.
One of the business accounts, you can set it up to do that.
That's good to know. I've been using a different service for that. That's great. Cool.
How accurate is it?
Depends on the topic, but it's highly technical. It's a little less. This general conversation, I'd say probably we'll get about 90 to 95% accurate.
Wow. What amazes me is I have Dragons Naturally Speaking on my computer, and I don't use it because it's such a pain, but I can speak into my phone and I get a nearly perfect transcription.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so I have the and my son started using it as well. So he has dysgraphia. So for him, writing notes is a struggle. So like when he's reading books for school, he'll pause at a moment and record his note in otter.ai, and it'll write it out for him, but it'll also save it as an MP3. So he can play back the MP3 and also have written notes. And that's been a game changer for him as well.
That's great.
We've also used Otter to record podcasts locally, like when we bring our mics and plug into the phone, and it also does pretty decent audio. There's also Auphonic has an iOS app that you can record into as well, and it's phenomenal. Like,
do you try to have? Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Do you try to have like two recordings going at once, just in case, as a failsafe?
No, but I might have to try that next time. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened with the last one. The Auphonic app is interesting because it records it locally, and then you can upload it to the Auphonic servers. But they're also, so I use the iRig mics that plug right into the iPhone, mm-hmm. And two mics, and he'll record his conversation, and it'll detect which mics are which and balance them out. Like, it's just doing all that for you. It's a no-brainer for doing quick podcasts. Like, he was at the AAA stadium for the Astros and recorded, podcast one of the pitchers there and one of their fielders as well as the manager. And all we used is Auphonic to do that.
Amazing.
That's great.
Right, and two little lapel mics that we can plug in and rig together with the iRig mics, and yeah, he's got a portable podcast studio anytime.
Wow. All right. Yeah, it sounds like we're wrapped up, but Brian, couldn't see you, but it was wonderful to hear you, and thank you so much for all of that you shared. And Chuck, thank you for showing up and being a willing participant. And Johnny, you're awesome.
We will talk more and keep the plans going forward.
Exciting times.
Good day, gentlemen.
Take care.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.